day used to actually encourage black authors, because the white publishers had this idea of what white people wanted to read. For example, in 1928, Claude McKay, who was a great author, great poet, but nevertheless, Claude McKay in 1928 published a novel, Home to Harlem, he called it. It became a bestseller. And anytime you hear of a black novel becoming a bestseller, you must get suspicious. But you know, there aren't so many black people in this country. If it becomes a bestseller, it means a lot of white folk are buying it. But ask yourself, why are they buying it? Is it because they love black folk? In Claude McKay's case, it became a bestseller because Claude McKay went along with what the editors asked him to do. He painted black folk as, you know, lecturers, licentious people. The main character was a man who was a porter on the train and so on. He was sleeping around with women all over the country and whatnot and whatnot. White folks had this kind of idea that black folks were like this. The publishers asked Claude McKay to feed that kind of prejudice that he did. He made a lot of money. Garvey, of course, was very upset, because here was a case where a book became a bestseller. You know, black folk were going on and buying it just because it was a bestseller, without really stopping to think, without having any opportunity of finding out from an independent pro-black source whether the book was good or bad. So again, race first. We have to interpret our own reality. As Garvey said, the right is ours and God's. Garvey put race first into the field of religion as well. Garvey was one of the early leaders among our people who advanced the idea that we have to depict God as black. Right. At Garvey's conventions, there used to be pictures of Jesus Christ as a black man of sorrows. And yes, there were pictures of the Black Madonna at Garvey's conventions. Garvey said that historically people have sometimes depicted their gods in human form. Somehow they give them an opportunity to concretize and to focus. And Garvey said that as long as you depict your God in a human form, then you have to depict that God to look like you. That's right. That's right. That's right. And think of our unfortunate situation in a country like this. Can you imagine our situation? Slaves, black slaves, enslaved by white slave masters, being beaten all week by the white slave master, then having to go to church on Sunday and worship a God that looked like that slave master. What kind of an indignity was this? This is the ultimate indignity that we heap upon any people. They have to go to church on a Sunday and worship the slave master. There is no indignity worse than this. And yet when Garvey put forward this idea, many black preachers couldn't see what he was talking about. And Garvey wasn't the first to put forward this idea. Long before Garvey, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who was based in Atlanta here also for a while in the 19th century, Bishop Turner also put forward that idea. God, if you want to depict your God as a human being, you have to depict that God as black. Garvey pointed out that we were some of the few people in the history of the world who worship gods of a different race from ourselves. Anywhere you go in the world, people worship gods that look like them. The Europeans don't worship any Chinese gods. The Chinese don't worship any Indian gods. So we were almost unique. Slaves worshiping the slave master. So religion for Garvey then was an important area. Garvey had a catechism, which did the same kinds of things that I heard this morning here, in this very hall this morning. It put forward religious ideas, it put forward ideas concerning the history of our race, the way we should act and so on. This was Garvey's race catechism. It was a mixture of religion as well as race uplift. So God for Garvey, Jesus Christ particularly, was a militant figure, a revolutionary. Bishop McGuire, who founded the African Orthodox Church, he once said that if Jesus Christ were to come back to New York today, he said, he wouldn't be able to live in Riverside Avenue. Riverside Avenue was at that time a place where black folk could go. So he said if Jesus Christ came back today, he couldn't live on Riverside Avenue. But Jesus Christ wasn't the white man. As we know historically, there were all kinds of races in Palestine. The only race which was represented at all anywhere in Palestine was the white race. Now Marcus Garvey argued that we have to move towards a strong nation, and he understood that Africa, being the seat, the seat of our ancestral homeland, that Africa would have again to be made strong. Garvey understood that if Africa was not strong, then the rest of us struggling in various parts of the world would always be at a kind of a disadvantage. And as I said last week in Detroit, I had the privilege of hearing Malcolm X speak in 1965 in London, about 2 weeks before they killed him. And I remember distinctly Malcolm X making the point about the Chinese in this country. Malcolm X was saying that the Chinese used to be a despised people in this country. Malcolm said that there used to be an expression in this country called Chinaman's luck. When your luck was done was out, you were said to have Chinaman's luck. Malcolm pointed out that when China itself became strong, when Chairman Mao emerged in China, when the Chinese got their act together in China, when the Korean War took place and the US discovered it could not beat China, in fact it almost lost the war, when the Chinese began exploding atomic bombs like everybody else, Malcolm pointed out that the Chinese in this country were viewed in a whole new perspective. And that was when the Chinese in this country, Malcolm argued, began to get respect. And so Garvey had the same kind of idea. In fact, Garvey used to say, a strong man is strong everywhere. He used to tell the story of Jack Johnson, the heavyweight boxer. As you know, Jack Johnson was the first heavyweight boxer who was given the opportunity to fight for the world championship. Jack Johnson was the uncrowned heavyweight champion of the world with the white boxers who fighting. And Jack Johnson literally followed the white world champion, a man called Tommy Byrne. In 1908, Jack Johnson followed him literally around the world. Finally caught up with him in Australia, fought him in Australia and beat him and won the world championship. But when Jack Johnson won the championship of the world, the white world said, well, hey, Jim Jeffries retired last year undefeated. So you can't call yourself champion, but you haven't beaten Jim Jeffries. Poor Jim Jeffries was happy, living somewhere in retirement, enjoying himself. He should have known better. The white folks went to him and said, hey, Jim Jeffries, man, you really got to come out of retirement. The future of our race is at stake. Jim Jeffries became, as you know, the first great white hope. And suffered the same fate as most of the great white hopes ever since. They brought poor Jim Jeffries out of retirement, arranged a fight in Reno, Nevada in 1910 against Jack Johnson. And Jack Johnson literally played with him for many rounds before finally putting him away. Played with him, made fun of him. Played with him, toyed with him like a cat and a mouse. White America was so upset that there were race riots all over this country next month. There were race riots, serious race riots. This whole country erupted in race riots. They passed a law making it an offense to distribute the film. The film was made of the fight. And they passed a law making it a criminal offense to distribute the film of the fight. So Marcus Garvey said Jack Johnson was a strong man. He went to Australia, he beat the white man. They brought him back to Nevada, he beat the white man. He was a strong man. So wherever he went, he was still strong. A strong man, Garvey said, is strong everywhere. So if Africa was strong, Garvey said, Africans would be strong everywhere. Garvey had a great impact on this country. One of the ways in which he had a great impact was on the question of self-reliance. Because Garvey again argued that an oppressed people could not, must not rely upon its oppressor to free itself. That was one of the big differences between Garvey and some of the integrationist organizations that did battle against him. Many of them had access to funds from white philanthropists and so on. But Garvey said you can't be struggling for your freedom and asking the very person you're struggling against to fund your struggle against them. Doesn't make sense, Garvey said. And Garvey showed that black folk, when approached in the correct way by honest leadership, were willing and ready and able to make the sacrifices necessary. Garvey proved that it can be done, that we have enough resources in this country to mobilize a serious freedom effort. Because black folk in this country are so far behind white folk in terms of income, it is very easy to forget. Okay, fine, we're far behind white folk, but it's very easy to forget that in absolute terms, there are a lot of resources in black America. A lot of resources. It may be less than in white America, but it's a lot of resources, enough to fund a serious struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. Every once in a while, you see these economists who do, power charts and so on. And I believe that if Afro-America was a nation, if you took the income of Afro-America and assumed for a minute that Afro-America was a nation, apparently the gross national income or whatever.